I trusted my husband with my whole heart. I never checked his phone, never questioned his late nights, never doubted his words. So when he said he was leaving for a business trip, I smiled and kissed him goodbye. But a few days later, at a luxury resort, I saw him, not alone, not working, laughing with another woman. In that moment, my heart broke, and something dangerous woke up inside me. Because I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I planned. I always trusted my husband, not because I was careless or naive, but because over the years, he had shown me that our bond was strong and reliable. Trust in a relationship is earned slowly, built day by day, moment by moment, and I had believed that our years together proved that he was someone I could rely on completely. I believed in his honesty, in his loyalty, in the life we had built together. Every shared morning, every quiet conversation, every laugh over nothing important, every gesture of affection, all of it told me that I could trust him without hesitation. Our mornings were predictable, comforting, and familiar. We sat at the same table, drank our coffee from the same mugs, and sometimes spoke about plans for the day, while other times we shared silence that felt completely natural. That silence was not awkward. It was peaceful. It was a sign of deep connection. Even in those quiet moments, I felt safe with him. Over the years, our routines and habits intertwined so seamlessly that it was hard to imagine life without that rhythm. He knew me better than anyone else. He knew when I needed space, when I needed comfort, when I wanted to be left alone, and when I needed to be held. I thought I knew him just as well. I thought I could read his moods, understand his stress, and anticipate his needs. I trusted that we saw each other clearly. Our communication didn't always need words. Gestures and glances were enough. That is why, when he told me about an upcoming business trip, I did not question him. I accepted it without hesitation. Business trips were normal. He had never given me a reason to doubt him. The night before he left, everything seemed normal. We lay in bed, talking about trivial matters, joking as we always did, sharing comfort and warmth. He held me in his arms, whispered that I should enjoy the quiet while he was gone, and I laughed, pretending that I would not miss him too much. But deep down, I knew I would. Everything felt ordinary, familiar, secure. There were no warning signs, nothing to hint that this sense of security was about to be broken. The next morning, I helped him pack. I folded his clothes carefully, reminded him not to forget his charger, and placed small items into his bag as I always had. These actions were second nature, repeated countless times over our years together. He stood at the door, smiling, confident, calm. He kissed my forehead softly and told me to take care of myself. I smiled and waved as he left. I believed in him completely. Once the door closed, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, strangely empty. I told myself this was normal. Of course, it was normal to feel this way when someone you love leaves for a few days. I tried to go about my day as usual, cleaning, organizing, playing music to fill the silence, but the quiet followed me everywhere. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of my own breathing, feeling a heaviness in my chest I couldn't explain. It was not fear, not doubt, but a hollow ache, subtle and strange, as if something in my life had shifted imperceptibly. Trying to distract myself, I decided to plan something for my own peace, a short getaway, a weekend at a seaside resort, a small break from routine. I told myself I deserved rest, calm, and space to think clearly. I believed this simple escape would refresh me and help me regain comfort in the silence of the house. I did not realize at the time that this decision, so innocent and seemingly harmless, would bring me face to face with a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew. I thought I was simply seeking peace. I did not know I was stepping toward a moment that would change my life completely. The resort was exactly what I imagined, serene, peaceful, and far enough from the world to allow me to breathe. The air smelled faintly of salt and blooming jasmine, and the sound of the waves crashing gently against the shore filled the background like a calming song. For a few hours, I let myself forget the hollow ache I had felt at home. I walked along the shoreline, letting the soft sand slip between my toes, imagining that life was simple and perfect. In that small, temporary world, I felt safe again. I wandered through the resort gardens, admiring the perfectly kept flowers and the warm glow of the late afternoon sun. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm that almost felt like relief. I convinced myself that this trip was exactly what I needed, that it was a short escape, and nothing could touch me here. I felt a fleeting sense of joy that made the loneliness of the house seem like a distant memory. Everything appeared normal, beautiful, and peaceful. And then I saw him. It happened almost without warning. I was walking past the pool, enjoying the glint of sunlight on the water, when I heard a laugh, a sound that immediately sent a jolt through my chest. My stomach twisted and my steps slowed. I froze, and there he was, leaning casually against a poolside cabana. My heart lurched violently. He was smiling, relaxed, carefree. But beside him was another woman, close enough that his hand brushed hers as they laughed together. Her smile was intimate, knowing, and utterly victorious in a way that made my stomach drop. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile that belonged to someone who had won something at my expense. For a moment, I could barely breathe. My knees weakened, and my hands trembled so much that I clutched the edge of the pool to steady myself. I wanted to scream, to run, to demand an explanation, but my body refused to obey. I was frozen in shock. Every gesture they shared screamed betrayal. Every glance, every touch, every laugh. My world, built over years of trust and love, shattered in the blink of an eye. Every memory I had of him felt like it had been a lie. Every promise, every whispered reassurance suddenly seemed meaningless. Tears blurred my vision, but I forced myself to step back into the shadows of the resort garden, hiding behind palm fronds and tropical blooms. I observed them, letting the full weight of the betrayal sink in. I inhaled deeply, catching the mingled scent of salt water and her perfume, and my chest tightened with a pain I had never known. I didn't scream or cry in public. I didn't make a scene. Instead, I allowed myself to feel the raw reality of what had been done to me, while silently making a promise. He would one day understand the pain he had caused. He would know what it felt like to lose someone who had given him everything. The first waves of heartbreak were sharp and immediate, but they were quickly joined by a different emotion, a simmering determination. This wasn't just sadness or grief. This was injustice. And injustice, I realized, demanded more than tears. It demanded reckoning. I would not confront him recklessly or impulsively. I would wait, observe, plan. I would make him see the consequences of his choices without him ever being able to manipulate the truth. I let my mind turn over every detail of what I saw, every subtle sign of their closeness, storing each gesture, each laugh, each glance, as a thread in a tapestry that I would one day use to reclaim my life. The night came, and with it, quiet reflection. I sat on the balcony of my resort room, the vast ocean stretching endlessly before me, its waves whispering secrets I did not want to hear. I thought I had known him completely. I had believed in love, in honesty, in commitment. But love was not supposed to feel like this. Love was not supposed to shatter the foundation of your life and leave you gasping in the ruins. I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, heard his laughter, felt the intimate warmth in his gaze directed at another. My mind replayed it endlessly, a cruel loop I could not stop. Yet even as the tears fell silently, I felt a new emotion emerging, clarity. Heartbreak had shown me the depth of his betrayal, but it had also awakened something in me. Anger, quiet and simmering, replaced some of the sorrow. This anger sharpened my thoughts, reminded me of my worth, and pushed me toward a plan. I would not crumble. I would not plead. I would not act in haste. I would transform this pain into strength, and one day he would see the consequences of his betrayal clearly, undeniably. The next morning, I woke with the same aching emptiness still heavy in my chest, but also with a new sense of purpose. My heartbreak had not vanished, but it had transformed into a quiet, simmering determination. I realized that any rash action would only satisfy a fleeting desire for revenge, not the deeper need for justice. I needed patience. I needed observation. I needed a plan that would give me control over a situation that had been stolen from me. I spent the first hours wandering the resort in a calm, measured way. I smiled at the staff, exchanged polite words with other guests, but my eyes were constantly alert, scanning, taking in every detail. The way he held her hand lightly, the subtle shifts in posture when she laughed, the way he leaned in slightly closer than necessary. All of it became data, small pieces of a puzzle. I cataloged them in my mind carefully. Every nuance mattered. Every tiny gesture could reveal cracks in their facade that I could one day use. I also reflected on myself. His betrayal had shown me not just his weakness, but also my own lost potential. I had given so much of my time, my energy, and my heart to a man who did not value it. Now I began to reclaim those pieces of myself. I wrote again, something I had neglected. I painted in the mornings, allowing colors to wash away some of the grief. I thought about career goals I had postponed, dreams I had tucked away for the sake of our life together. The betrayal had been a cruel teacher, but it had also reminded me of my own worth, my own abilities, my own independence. Throughout the day, I observed them from a distance, careful not to reveal that I was watching. Every laugh, every touch, every subtle glance was stored in my memory. I learned the rhythm of their interactions, the tiny habits they displayed when they thought no one was paying attention, the way she flicked her hair when nervous, the way he adjusted his collar unconsciously when she smiled. The patterns became clear, predictable, and I realized I could anticipate their movements, their small gestures of arrogance, their assumption that no one could see through them. I also studied the environment. The resort was large, with multiple paths, terraces, and secluded corners. It gave me ample opportunity to plan without their knowledge. I memorized exits, shadowed areas, and quiet places where conversations might be private but still observable from a safe distance. Every corner, every line of sight, every subtle detail became part of my mental blueprint. I was no longer just a hurt wife. I was a strategist. I was collecting the tools I would need to orchestrate my quiet, inevitable reckoning. As evening fell, I allowed myself a moment to breathe and reflect. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold, and for a brief moment, I felt a strange calmness. The heartbreak, the shock, and the betrayal still lingered, but they no longer paralyzed me. I had begun to reclaim agency over my life. My trust had been shattered, yes, but now it was replaced with clarity. Clarity about my worth, about the mistakes I had not seen, and about the careful steps I would take to ensure that justice, subtle yet absolute, would be served. By night, I was already considering the first steps of my plan. It would not be dramatic. It would not be loud. It would be precise, calculated, and inevitable. I would allow their arrogance to become their undoing. I would expose truths carefully, gently, but in a way that they could not ignore. My revenge would not be petty or cruel for its own sake. It would be measured, elegant, and transformative. Not just a punishment, but a reclamation of the life and dignity they had tried to steal from me. My heartbreak was no longer the end. It was the beginning of a deliberate, controlled journey toward justice. The following days at the resort became a careful balance of outward calm and inward calculation. I moved through the resort as if nothing had happened, smiling politely at staff, exchanging casual greetings with other guests, all the while keeping my attention focused on them. He still believed he was untouchable, and she believed she had won a secret victory. Neither knew that I was quietly cataloging every detail, every movement, every subtle interaction that revealed the depth of their arrogance and carelessness. I observed the way he assumed control in every social setting, speaking with confidence, laughing at jokes only he understood, leaning casually yet possessively towards her. And she, in turn, mirrored his behavior, unaware, perhaps, that her small acts of triumph were being noted, stored, and measured. I began recognizing patterns, the moments when his attention strayed from her, the tiny inconsistencies in her reactions when she thought no one was watching. Every gesture, no matter how small, became a thread in the tapestry I was weaving in my mind. During quiet mornings, I sat on the balcony of my room, looking at the ocean, letting the breeze carry away the tension in my shoulders while simultaneously sharpening the focus in my mind. The anger that had once threatened to consume me transformed into something more controlled. It became a precise tool, a guiding force that focused my energy on what mattered most, reclaiming the dignity and respect I had once given freely to someone who did not deserve it. I did not rush. I did not act impulsively. Patience, observation, and strategy became my allies. I began imagining the future carefully. Small scenarios played out in my mind, each one a test of their arrogance, each one a subtle reflection of the consequences of betrayal. I envisioned moments where their confidence would falter under scrutiny, when the careful veneer of their relationship would crack, and when the truth would surface in a way that left them exposed. I allowed myself to feel the satisfaction of such moments in my imagination, without haste, without cruelty for its own sake. Only precise, deliberate revelation. I also took the time to rebuild myself. I exercised, not obsessively, but to regain strength and stamina. I dressed thoughtfully, not for anyone else, but for myself, as a reminder that I still had power over my own life. I wrote, I painted, and I engaged with passions that had long been dormant. In doing so, I nurtured the side of me that he had overlooked, the woman capable of resilience, intelligence, and unyielding strength. Each moment spent observing him and her was now balanced with moments devoted entirely to reclaiming myself. By midday, I often found them together, their hands occasionally brushing, their laughter mingling with the sound of the waves. And yet, with each interaction, I remained silent, calm, and composed. I did not confront. I did not cry. I did not make my presence known. Instead, I let the reality of their arrogance and carelessness settle fully in my mind. The more I watched, the more I realized how underestimating me had been their greatest mistake. They had assumed I would crumble quietly, that I would suffer in silence, but they were wrong. Every detail, every gesture, every careless laugh was a lesson in observation, a brick in the foundation of my strategy. Evenings were spent reflecting. I cataloged every piece of information in my mind, her habits, his reactions, their reliance on each other for validation. The more I studied, the more I understood their weaknesses. Pride, vanity, and arrogance became threads I could weave into a plan that would reveal the truth without them suspecting. And while the heartbreak of betrayal lingered, it no longer ruled me. It had been transformed into purpose, a calculated patience that promised justice in the most effective, undeniable way possible. I had become not just a witness to their deceit, but a quiet architect of the consequences they would one day face. By the fifth day at the resort, I had fully settled into a routine that allowed me to observe them without revealing any sign of awareness. I moved through the public areas with calm ease, smiling when necessary, chatting politely, but never letting them sense the depth of my scrutiny. Each laugh they shared, each subtle glance, each small touch became part of a mental record I was compiling meticulously. I was learning their patterns, their behaviors, and the way they assumed no one noticed them. Their arrogance became the tool I would use, though they could not yet see it. I noticed how he relied on appearances, the confident way he carried himself, the casual dominance he displayed in public settings. She, in turn, mirrored him, her sense of triumph growing with every small victory he unknowingly allowed. Their relationship, built on secrecy and the thrill of deception, revealed itself in minor inconsistencies. The way she hesitated before answering questions, the slight shift in his posture when someone looked their way. Every detail became significant. I cataloged them all, not impulsively, but with calculated attention, storing each observation for the moment it would be used. During quiet mornings, I took walks along the garden paths, the ocean breeze soothing, yet sharpening my focus simultaneously. I allowed myself to reflect on the past, on the years I had devoted to him, and on the trust that had been shattered. But the reflection was not purely sorrowful. It was also instructive. Each memory, each small disappointment, each moment of unquestioned trust became a lesson in human behavior and a foundation for my strategy. I realized that strength came not from immediate reaction, but from patience, clarity, and precision. As the days progressed, I began forming the outlines of a plan. It would be subtle, almost invisible at first, allowing their own arrogance to betray them. I would not confront, I would not yell, and I would not act in haste. Instead, I would create situations where the truth of their deceit became apparent through the natural unfolding of their own actions. Every observed interaction, every careless gesture, every assumption that I was unaware would feed into a scenario that revealed the full reality of their betrayal. I also dedicated time to myself. I exercised, not for vanity, but to reclaim the physical and mental energy that had been absorbed by the stress of betrayal. I dressed with care, intentionally choosing outfits that reminded me of my strength and self-worth. I engaged in writing and painting, allowing creativity to sharpen my mind and provide an outlet for emotions. This dual focus, observation and self-reclamation, became essential. I was no longer a passive victim. I was the architect of a slow, deliberate, and inevitable revelation. Every evening, I recorded mental notes of their conversations, noting phrases, laughs, subtle gestures. I cataloged not only their actions, but also the reactions they provoked in each other. It became clear that they had grown complacent, confident in the secrecy of their relationship. That complacency was the leverage I would later use. I visualized scenarios in my mind where their pride and arrogance would become undeniable to those around them. I imagined the quiet but devastating impact that subtle exposure would bring. Each scenario, each careful thought strengthened my resolve and sharpened my sense of timing. By the end of the 5th day, I felt a quiet satisfaction in the knowledge that every observation, every step, and every careful reflection had prepared me. The heartbreak was still present, but it was transformed. It had become purpose. The anger that could have consumed me instead guided me with precision. I was no longer reacting emotionally. I was preparing strategically. I understood fully that the most powerful form of justice would be one that they could not anticipate, one that would unfold naturally and leave them facing the consequences of their own choices. I had begun to turn my pain into power, and the subtle strategy I had built would soon become undeniable reality. By the 6th day, my presence at the resort had become entirely natural and undetectable. I walked among the guests with ease, greeted staff politely, and carried myself with calm confidence. Meanwhile, my attention remained entirely on him and the woman who thought she had won a secret victory. Each interaction, each laugh, each subtle gesture between them was recorded in my mind with meticulous care. Their careless arrogance, the way they believed no one was watching, only strengthened my resolve. I was no longer merely hurt or betrayed. I was a strategist, carefully observing every detail, storing it for the right moment. I noted every pattern, the way he glanced at her when he thought I wouldn't notice, the subtle shift in her expression when he spoke, the tiny touches that revealed familiarity and ownership. Nothing escaped my attention. I cataloged every laugh, every movement, every minor inconsistency. Even the way they assumed public spaces were safe for their intimacy became part of the plan forming in my mind. They had underestimated me, and that underestimation would be their downfall. In addition to observation, I focused on rebuilding myself. I exercised to regain both strength and stamina, not for vanity, but for clarity and power. I dressed with intention, not for anyone else, but for myself, each outfit a reminder of my self-worth and independence. I painted, wrote, and pursued small creative projects that had long been neglected. Each moment spent on self-improvement strengthened my focus and sharpened my strategy. I was reclaiming what had been stolen from me: my peace, my confidence, my sense of purpose. I reflected on the nature of their arrogance. Both of them relied on appearances, believing that confidence and charm could hide the truth. They underestimated subtle observation and patience. I realized that the most effective strategy would not be loud confrontation, but quiet control, a demonstration of consequences that unfolded naturally and inevitably. I would allow them to reveal themselves through their own choices, their own careless behavior, and the unspoken truth of their betrayal. Every evening, I cataloged everything I had observed during the day: the way she laughed, the way he moved, the minor gestures that showed familiarity and comfort. Each observation became a thread in a larger tapestry, a precise map of their behavior that I could later use to orchestrate exposure and justice. This process of careful recording and reflection also served to calm my mind. Anger and heartbreak were still present, but they had transformed into clarity, focus, and controlled energy. I began imagining the precise steps that would allow me to reveal the truth without aggression or confrontation. I considered how social settings, subtle questions, and casual remarks could unsettle them, forcing them to confront their own behavior. Every detail I had recorded could serve as leverage, a quiet but powerful way to make them face reality. I visualized the moment when their confidence would falter, when their casual arrogance would crumble under the weight of consequences. Each imagined scenario strengthened my resolve and sharpened my patience. By the end of the 6th day, I felt a strange calm power. I was no longer merely reacting to betrayal. I was planning it carefully. Every step, every thought, every small observation brought me closer to a moment of inevitable reckoning. I had transformed heartbreak into strategy, sorrow into purpose, and betrayal into opportunity. I was ready, not in haste, but in quiet, controlled preparation. The next moves would be subtle, deliberate, and ultimately undeniable. I had become the architect of justice, patiently waiting for the precise moment when the consequences of their actions would unfold exactly as I envisioned. By the 7th day, my plan had taken shape fully in my mind. I moved through the resort with ease, calm and composed, while continuing to observe them. Every interaction, every laugh, every small gesture between him and the other woman was recorded carefully in my mind. They believed they were invisible, that their secrecy was secure. Their arrogance blinded them, and that blindness was the advantage I now held. I was no longer a victim of their betrayal. I was the strategist quietly preparing to restore balance and claim justice. I began testing small scenarios, mentally mapping out ways to expose their carelessness without creating chaos or confrontation. I imagined casual questions from friends, subtle remarks in conversation, and the natural unfolding of events that would make them reveal the truth without suspecting my influence. Each idea was deliberate, measured, and designed to strike precisely at the foundation of their deception. I allowed myself to feel the satisfaction of anticipation, not cruel satisfaction, but the quiet pleasure of knowing that justice would unfold naturally. Simultaneously, I continued my personal restoration. I exercised, focusing on strength and poise. I dressed elegantly, not to impress them, but to remind myself of my dignity and self-worth. I wrote, painted, and pursued creative passions, reconnecting with the parts of myself that had been overshadowed by trust and love given to someone undeserving. Each moment of self-care, each small accomplishment, became a piece of my larger plan, reinforcing my independence and power. I was building not only a strategy but also a life of resilience and confidence that could not be shaken. I continued to observe them closely, noting subtle shifts in behavior. She began displaying tiny signs of insecurity, moments where her confident facade faltered. He, too, revealed cracks in his composure when questioned casually or when plans changed unexpectedly. Every detail, however minor, became critical in my planning. I visualized scenarios where these cracks would widen, where their hidden truths would be revealed through their own actions and assumptions. The more I watched, the more certain I became that the moment of reckoning was approaching. Evenings were spent reflecting, cataloging observations, and refining strategies. I focused on timing, subtlety, and control. I reminded myself that my goal was not humiliation for its own sake, but precise revelation and reclamation of dignity. I would not confront recklessly. Instead, I would orchestrate circumstances so that truth, subtle but undeniable, would emerge. I imagined the exact sequences of conversation, gestures, and observations that would bring their deceit to light. Each rehearsal strengthened my confidence and sharpened my patience. By the end of the seventh day, I had fully embraced the duality of my position, quiet observer and deliberate architect. I was no longer a passive victim. I was fully in control of the narrative. I had transformed heartbreak and betrayal into purpose and strategy. I knew that the next day would bring the opportunity to execute the first steps of my plan. I would act subtly, elegantly, and decisively. The arrogance they displayed would be their undoing, and I would remain composed, dignified, and untouchable throughout. The stage was set, the moment was near, and I was ready to reclaim my life and demonstrate the consequences of their betrayal. The final day arrived, and with it, a quiet sense of anticipation. I moved through the resort with calm confidence, fully aware of my presence, fully aware of their actions. He and the other woman continued in their careless arrogance, convinced that no one was observing, that the world had no eyes for their secret triumph. But I had been watching, recording, and planning. Every laugh, every touch, every glance had been cataloged in my mind, and now it was time for the subtle orchestration I had imagined for days. I invited a few trusted friends under the guise of a casual weekend gathering. Nothing extravagant, nothing obvious, only a small group whose presence would naturally create interactions without raising suspicion. My husband, confident and unassuming, accepted, bringing her with him, completely unaware of the quiet web I had spun around them. They believed themselves untouchable, yet their every move was about to be framed by the careful circumstances I had constructed. The first stage unfolded gently. My friends began casual conversation, asking innocent questions, speaking lightly of experiences and encounters, all while I remained composed. Their attention was drawn naturally to his and her subtle reactions. She laughed nervously at first, brushing off questions, yet cracks appeared. Her confidence faltered as she sought his reassurance, and he offered none. Every carefully observed detail came into play, a gentle yet undeniable exposure of the truth. Their arrogance had blinded them. My patience ensured they could not hide any longer. Next, I introduced casual remarks about my own stay at the resort, telling small, innocuous stories about familiar faces and experiences that hinted at observation without accusation. His eyes flickered, her smile faltered, and silence fell. The subtle weight of exposure pressed upon them, not through confrontation, but through the undeniable truth of shared experience. My friends, unaware of the full story, only reflected normal curiosity, yet the effect was devastating. The carefully constructed reality they had relied upon was now challenged by natural consequences, their confidence cracking under the pressure of subtle scrutiny. I remained composed, observing without gloating, without raising my voice. The satisfaction I felt was quiet, internal, powerful. Every tear I had shed, every sleepless night, every pang of anger had led to this moment. They were being exposed not by me directly, but by the circumstances I had guided with patience and precision. Their deception, arrogance, and casual cruelty were now visible, undeniable, and inescapable. The weight of their betrayal finally became evident in the most elegant, controlled manner possible. By evening, the gathering ended, and I walked away with my head held high. I did not need apologies, confessions, or confrontation. I had demonstrated the power of observation, patience, and controlled action. I had reclaimed my dignity, my confidence, and my strength. The heartbreak remained, but it had transformed into liberation. I was no longer defined by betrayal, no longer tethered to the man who had deceived me. My life, my choices, and my resilience now define me. Standing at the edge of the cliffside overlooking the ocean, I felt the waves crashing below, as if echoing the rhythm of my own heart. The pain of betrayal had not disappeared, but it had been converted into empowerment. I had loved deeply, suffered greatly, and now emerged victorious. My revenge had not been cruel, only precise and necessary. It had restored balance, revealed truth, and most importantly, allowed me to reclaim my life fully. For the first time in years, I felt free, untouchable, and unshakably strong. The past could not hold me, and the future was entirely mine to define.